Welcome to episode 66 of the Positive on Publishing podcast. This podcast aims to inspire you with information to allow you to pursue your creative life with a smile on your face. I'm your host, Dr. Catherine Guillet. Learn more about my work at makeeverythingfun.com. My guest today is Dr. Gay Hendricks. Dr. Hendricks has been a leader in the fields of relationship transformation and body-mind transformation for more than 45 years. After earning his PhD from Stanford in 1974, he has served the world as a psychologist, educator, and best-selling author of more than 40 books. Some of his major titles include 5 Wishes, The Big Leap, Conscious Loving, and Conscious Loving Ever After. These last 2 titles were co-authored with his beautiful partner of more than 35 years, Dr. Carol Hendricks, and we're going to call her Katie if we refer to her. He and Katie are co-founders of the Hendricks Institute, an international learning center that teaches core skills for conscious living and conscious loving. Gay's latest book, which we'll be talking about on this interview, is called Conscious Luck, and it reveals 8 ways to change your fortune through power of intention. Written in partnership with Carol Kline, who will also appear on this podcast, Gay and Carol educate readers on how to seize control of their destiny and create the life of their dreams. This book offers a step-by-step program with techniques, true stories, and personal journeys for inspiration. Welcome to the show, Gay.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm glad to be here with you.
I am so excited about your book, and I have to say I have some inside scoops about the book, and because Carol's interview will actually just precede yours. So this is going to be coming out right before the release of the book in May. So I know a little bit about it, but for listeners that maybe haven't seen or heard the interview with Carol, why don't you give us an overview of the genesis of the book? I know it was long in the making, and it's a beautiful story.
Yes, thank you. Well, it kind of serves as the sequel to The Big Leap, which came out about 10 years ago and has continued to be kind of a Bible of the coaching movement. And so this takes that work into a whole different dimension, so to speak. The Big Leap was about 2 big things. It was about how to overcome your upper limit problem and also how to find a home in your zone of genius, what I now call the genius spiral, where you're living your life out of what you most love to do. With the new book, Conscious Luck, ever since I was a kid, I've been convinced that luck was more of a matter of choice rather than just random chance. And I base that on a particular thing that happened when I was 14 years old that I talk about in the book, and I'll be happy to talk to you about here. But ever since I was a kid, I've been convinced that luck wasn't just a matter of luck, that you could actually choose to be luckier. And so I kind of worked on that for a whole bunch of years, and I would meet Carol in the farmer's market and say hello to her, and we'd talk about this because she was interested in the subject too. And so finally, we sat down for a year and worked on the book. But basically, the idea of conscious luck is we give 8 different ways you can come in on changing your life for the better through becoming luckier. And some old saying says, it's much better to be lucky than it is to be good. It's much easier to be luckier than it is to be better. And I want you all to be better, obviously, but I want us all to claim that luck part of ourselves that's already there. One of the things that Carol did that I really appreciated is that she did a whole bunch of interviews with people that are doing research on conscious luck, and she came across a Stanford professor, my old alma mater, named Tina Selig, Dr. Tina Selig, and we talk about her in the book because she's doing scientific research on conscious luck and did a TED Talk on it that was very, very powerful. But anyway, in the context of interviewing her, we became even more convinced that there are these certain things that human beings can learn to do that make them luckier. Tina says, that luck is not a matter of chance, but it's like a wind that's blowing all the time. And if you learn how to get your sails up into the wind, you kind of catch these currents and move through life in a way that looks effortlessly, but almost like you're graced.
Don't we all want that? And I will link to Tina's TED Talk in the show notes. But Gay, you mentioned that this had an origin, sort of a seed in your childhood. So, of course, I want to go there. In Carol's interview, she talks about how this was sort of a seed that germinated between you and her over a period of about a decade, where she was almost like haunted sounds like a negative word, but she was sort of like continuously inspired to follow up with this. And there was no mention of it linking back to your childhood. So can we kind of go there? Because it's all going to be very interesting to see how this is a lifelong journey.
Yes, well, this thing that happened when I was 14 was the very first thing that convinced me that luck was a matter of choice rather than destiny. I was at the movies, and there was a kid sitting next to me. I call him Danny in the book. And so Danny was another 14-year-old. We're both in the ninth grade. And there was maybe 250 people in the theater. And for some reason, they were having a drawing that day where everybody had put their tickets into a goldfish bowl. And then they were going to draw out 3 prize winners. And the top one was a wristwatch, which I thought was pretty darn good, because we'd all just spent a quarter, I think, to get into the movie theater. Anyway, Danny said next to me, when they got ready to have the drawing, he said, "Watch this. I'm going to win the watch. Count on it." And I said, "Okay." I didn't know him very well at the time, so this kind of came out of the blue. I said, "Okay." And so sure enough, when it came to have the drawing, his name came out and he won the wristwatch. And afterwards, that boggled my mind. And so at that time, I was obsessed with Sherlock Holmes. I read every Sherlock Holmes book there was. In fact, my ninth grade English teacher called me Sherlock because I would always come in to do book reports, and they would always be on a new Sherlock Holmes book I just read. So I was fascinated with kind of detection and how people thought. And I said to Danny, "How did you do that? How did you manage to pull that off?" And he told me that one day he had just made up his mind to be lucky. And from then, all these things started happening to him. And I thought, wow, what a wild idea. And so I said, I'm going to do that. And so I just made up my mind that I was going to be the kind of person that was always in the right time at the right place for good things to happen to. And so here comes the magic part. I went into a magazine store right after this. I went into a magazine store that was kind of like our hangout place. It was called Ned's Smoke Shop, and they sold cigarettes and cigars in one part of the shop, and the other part was magazines. And there was a little part of coin collector apparatus because Ned himself was a avid coin collector. So us kids would hang in there. I was a coin collector at the time too, and so was this other kid, Danny. And so I went into the coin collector part one afternoon, and I was just looking at various things. And then it came time for me to go to the movies. Now, when I came in, there had been this elderly man and his wife who was a famous coin collector, and they were talking to Ned. And he was carrying this big black satchel, like a doctor's bag, but I imagined it had coins in it. Anyway, they were talking back and forth, and I wasn't paying any attention. But later on, I walked outside to go to the movies, and there was that satchel sitting right by a parking meter and a car. And immediately it clicked in my Sherlock Holmes mind, oh, he must have put his briefcase down while he put the coins in the meter and then walked off without it. And so without even thinking about it, I picked it up and walked back into the coin shop and said to Ned, "Hey, this is that man that was just in here, right?" And Ned said, "Oh my God, where did you find that?" And I said, "Well, it was out here by the parking meter." And I explained what I thought had happened. And he said, "Oh my gosh." So I gave it to Ned, and then without thinking one more thing about it, went off to the movies. While I was at the movies, the coin collector and his wife went off to have lunch. Obviously, they'd left the valise behind. And during the lunch, he became aware that he didn't have his briefcase anymore. And he actually called the police and had the restaurant locked down while they went and searched everybody in the restaurant. And this is in a little town of 10,000. So it was plenty enough to make the newspaper. And let me tell you what happened. So I come out of the movies. I came out of the movies and I come back to the to Ned's smoke shop, and I was going to wait for my mom to come pick me up and drive us home. And so I walked in the door after being at the movies for 2 hours, and Ned said, "Where have you been? We've been looking all over for you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Old Mr. Da da da, whatever his name was, wanted to thank you, and he wanted to give you a coin collection that he had, but he had to go back home, and so he's gone now, but he'll be in touch, believe me." And so, sure enough, a couple of weeks later, this beautiful mint collection of these coins that I particularly like, called Buffalo nickels at the time, and it was a total complete collection of every Buffalo nickel ever made. And so it's really a great gift, probably worth at the time $35 to $50, which was an astronomical sum because this was in 1959, probably, when you could get a gallon of gas for a quarter. And so there's the story of my turning my luck around. So suddenly I go from this little random event to suddenly whoosh, now I'm on the front page of the newspaper the next day, the boy who returned the small fortune in coins. And so that was my first big success as a lucky person.
That's so beautiful. So you basically learned from Danny, we'll call him, from the book, that you could change your luck around by not considering it something that's random. And I love the title of your book, Gay, because the combination of conscious and luck is kind of what you've just described. It's like it almost sounds at first paradoxical, as a title. It's like we all do kind of think of luck as being something that's random, and lucky means that, you just, it was this random thing, right? But to think of it more as something that you can, well, first of all, I love the metaphor of it being like a wind that's always blowing, right?
Yes.
And it's about getting, your sails to have it lift you up. But also the conscious part of it means that you can't just leave it to, like, putting out your wings and hoping that wind will lift you up. It's something that you actually have to put effort towards and consciousness towards. So can we talk a little bit about that book title and how it ties together a lot of the principles and the practices in the book?
Yes, well, originally it comes from our book, Conscious Loving. We began using conscious in the title when our book, Conscious Loving, came out, and many thanks to Oprah 30 years ago, it became a big bestseller and a classic in the relationship movement, and still is to this day. And so that was our first use of the word conscious in that context. And so in the context of luck, what it really means is making up your mind and making some choices that favor luck. That luck is really, we think of it as going hand in hand, your conscious part going hand in hand and kind of working directly with the universe rather than kind of working against the universe. And so once you develop the willingness to let your luck be supported out there in the real world by shifting your thoughts, then you become, say, what are my thoughts that I really need to shift? What are the things inside me that I really need to shift? And we talk about a number of them in the book, but one of them that's really important is what we call having luck-worthy goals. In other words, having goals that are high enough quality that if you were lucky and those got supported, it would be a really good thing for you and the people around you. So, a lot of people first think when they're going to change their luck, oh, I'll be lucky enough to have a brand new Ferrari or whatever. And it's fine to create material things out of luck. But I can tell you from personal experience that what's really important, and this is based on working with about 4,500 couples over the years, as well as 800 business executives and about 20,000 individuals. So a whole lot of hours sitting here in this office have gone into telling you that when you develop goals that you are passionate about, when you can get your heart behind 4 or 5 things that you really want to create while you're breathing the blessed air of this planet, luck comes in much faster because you've given luck a reason to land. You've given luck a good landing space. Because if you don't know what you want, you don't know what you're important, what would be the point of luck paying you a visit? That would just make you more convinced that the universe is an unsafe place, let's say. So I always say that I'm a raging pronoiac. I'm not a paranoid, I'm a pronoid, which means that I believe that the universe is falling all over itself to help me. And if I will just allow it to, then I'll flourish here. But if I don't allow myself to be supported and living in a friendly universe, then I will get confirmation that it's a dangerous place out here. So I think we create the world we live in largely by the quality of our heart and mind working in harmony with the laws that are already here. So I don't recommend that people use their conscious luck to try to develop goals that are superhuman, like the ability to fly. Birds already have that really figured out. We don't need any flopping around human beings trying to fly. So let's get our focus on the things that would really make our hearts light up. And by the same token, really get our relationship life focused on the people that really make our hearts light up and our eyes light up when they walk in the room.
I think I chose this heart necklace for a reason this morning as I was getting ready for this interview. And Gay, you've mentioned some things that make me believe, and I do believe this, but I'd love for you to explain it, that this idea of conscious luck is really inner and outer work. And the inner is what you've talked about in terms of cultivating these beliefs that the universe does have our back, that we are deserving, and that can get to some of the managing of the limiting beliefs that I know you work with in your work and in your psychology, but also this outer aspect, which is that, you mentioned being in the right place at the right time. Can we kind of dive a little bit deeper into both of those parts of conscious luck, both the inner work and the outer work? Because I think they both go together.
Yes. I'd love to tell another story, if I may, about a moment that illustrates this point. One of the simple definitions of conscious luck is always being in the right place at the right time for good things to happen. That's just one of my core definitions of how it feels. And I consider myself, by the way, to be the luckiest person I know now. And if you run across in your travels somebody that looks luckier to you, I want to have them introduced to me, if you don't mind. So, but take it from the guy who feels like the luckiest man in the world. Always being in the right place at the right time is a good, convenient way to think about the state of consciousness we're talking about here. And here's a good example of that. One time, my plane was late. I had to change planes at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And if you've been there, or even if you're not, it's one of these huge airports that have many, many, many different terminals, and you get to one to the other on a train that goes around. And my plane was an hour late. And so when I got off, I was wheeling my little luggage as fast as my little legs would take me. And even to get to the train, I looked at and saw that it looked like I wasn't going to make my connection. And so I got there as fast as the train was taking me. And I got off at my terminal and I was chugging along with my bag. And then I saw the sign that said closed, gate closed. The boarding was over. And so I kind of took a breath. By the way, I keep this on my desk and on my computer desktop at all times. It just says breathe. When in doubt, take a breath. And so there I'm walking along, and instead of hurrying, I just slowed down and enjoyed my walk down to down to the podium. And as I was approaching the podium, I witnessed the following thing. There was a guy, looked like maybe in his 50s, executive kind of guy looking, and he was furious, and he was pounding on the table. And when I got up behind him, he was saying, I have a seat on this airplane and blah, 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 and the person was patiently explaining him, I'm sorry, but you were late. We made the call and we just had to close the gate and go. That's the protocol. And he was going on, and finally she said, I'm not, nothing I can do about it. And so he stormed up the concourse. He's shouting over his shoulder, I'm going to sue you for every ounce of, and so anyway, he was very upset. So I stepped up to the front, and I could see that the poor clerk was still kind of rattled, and I just took a breath, and I said something like, boy, one of those days, huh? And she said, yeah, you wouldn't believe it, blah, 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 blah. And so I said, it looks like the plane is closed, and I'll make arrangements, but I just wanted to double check here because I have a first class seat. And so just then the door opens, the jetway, and one of the flight attendants comes scurrying up to the podium. And they have this little whispered conversation, but I'm overhearing it. And the idea is we've miscounted and we have one seat left. And so I saw the clerk do the following thing. She looked up the concourse to where this guy was, walking on. And then I saw this little smile break out on her face. And she said, we have a seat for you. It's in first class too, by the way, and kind of gave me a little wink. So here I go from thinking things were hopeless to being in the right place at the right time, just kind of taking things as they are and breathing with them and being with them, and going to the other extreme of that guy that was going to sue them for every dollar they had. And so that's the kind of shift in consciousness you see, because the moment you say, okay, I am in the right place at the right time. Maybe my plane was late, or maybe I'm not going to make my connection, but this is where I am, and I'm going to make this the best place in the universe right now. Whoosh. Suddenly things begin to open up. There's a wonderful Kathleen Rains poem from many years ago called The Invisible Way. It talks about how birds know this invisible way through the air. They are so sensitive to the currents that they find their way. Or to use another really example from the animal world, I like to watch nature documentaries, by the way, so I'm always have a good tiger example or a turtle example at hand. But did you know that turtles in Argentina lay their eggs on the shore in Argentina, and then they swim off? I'm sorry, they swim off to an island that's 1,500 miles away and lay their eggs and then come back. So somehow they have known for thousands of years how to find this little island. And what's spectacular about it is this little island is only about big enough to have a landing strip on. It's called Ascension Island, and it was used as a refueling place during the Second World War. And there was a famous poem, if you miss Ascension, your widow gets your pension, because it's this little tiny island that was just basically a fuel dump, and you'd land on it and get more fuel and head on to Europe. And so these turtles have figured this out. So why don't we as humans figure out how to ride these currents ourselves? Because it looks like the universe already knows how to be in the right place at the right time.
And you said something about how you have to give luck a place to land. Maybe that's what it's all about, is creating that space within our mind-body system to allow that space to occur.
To find our own inner Ascension Island inside, our place of where we have to go for home, or where we go for home. And to find that, one of the things I've been talking about recently is there's been, in various contexts, the whole idea of sheltering in place. And I've made up a new concept that I put out on Instagram a while back. And I said, let's also remember to shelter in space. And what I meant by that is that human beings for millions of years have been going to contraction to feel safe. In other words, if we hear something rustling out there, we go, our muscles tighten, our breath catches, and a whole bunch of different physiological things happen. But what they're really about is preparing us for fight or flight. And so when we tighten up like that and go to contraction, it's based on an fear-based view of the world, and rightly so. It helped get us here. But what I'm suggesting now is that we go to expansion for safety, not to contraction. We already know how to contract, but what we don't know yet is how to expand into moments of learning when we're under stress instead of contracting into fear and making our decisions based out of a contracted state of consciousness. That it's possible to expand into space because we're made of the same space inside that's outside us here. If you look down into the human cell, you'll see that it's mostly space. There's some stuff moving around in it, and there's a nucleus and there's an edge to it, but most of it is space. And so if you think of us in nature being made of exactly the same thing as everything else in nature is made of, because we're just a different arrangement of it, then you see that we have the same inner space inside us that we have outer space outside. And that's why we say it's an inside-outside job, because you need to change your attitude about luck. That's a starting place. And that's really, we document how to do that in the book really carefully. But then you also need to follow that up with practice, things you do out in the world. Like, for example, it would be really good to sit down for an hour and create your list of luck-worthy goals. We have a template for how to do that in the book. And so, but you need to invest the time. And so I've done that. I've sat down many years ago and figured out exactly what I wanted, what my optimum life would look like. I wrote about that in my book, 5 Wishes. I put it down into 5 things that I really wanted to accomplish or experience in my life. And so I think every human being has the capacity to get at least 4 or 5 things that their hearts desire while they're here. Maybe you could do 30, but first of all, figure out what those 4 or 5 are, and that'll get you having luck a good place to land.
It's so beautiful and such important advice right now in this world in the challenging times that we're in. And I'm thrilled to hear that your publisher is still putting out the book on the timeline, coming out in May. I've heard of other publishers that are delaying book releases because of what's going on right now. But I think the world really needs these messages right now because it gives this idea of conscious luck, really gives us the sense that we do have a little more control. And I think a lot of us right now feel like we don't have control. And Gay, I wanted to go back to something that you talked about in that story of your interaction with the flight attendant. And what that shows me is, yeah, we're sheltering in place, we're sheltering in space right now, but a lot of us, including myself, are also sheltering in place with very closely with family members, maybe in a surprised way. For example, my daughter, who was supposed to be at college in her freshman year, how exciting for her to get 1,500 miles away from mom and dad, is now home again. And so a lot of parents, have children in their houses and people are in close quarters. So what I wanted to bring out in that story of your interaction is that when we work on conscious luck within ourselves, that inner work that goes out to the outer work, there's also an element of mirror neurons. And so because you were creating that relationship in your inner world and extending it outward, then it seemed to have created this union of goodness with the person you were interacting with, then created this conscious luck bubble around you. And I think it would be fun for listeners to feel like, wait, I might be in this situation where I've got kids home, I might be homeschooling, everyone's working from home, homes are now businesses and gyms and everything else. How does that affect, how does conscious luck and our cultivation through all of your beautiful practices in the book actually help not just ourselves, but our relationships with others?
Yes, well, first of all, I want to just honor and acknowledge the tremendous stresses that relationships are in. Like I've gotten calls over the past few weeks, everything from, friends of mine who they're not used to being teachers of a 8-year-old and a 14-year-old, and suddenly they're kind of have those two sitting home all day doing stuff. And another extreme, not to put a downer on our conversation, but my niece runs a big organization on the East Coast that serves domestic violence victims. She has like 15 or 20 counselors that are working in this center. And unfortunately, the instance of things like that has gone way up in this stressful time too. But just, for sure, all of us are moving through relationship spaces that we probably didn't count on moving through. That's why it's so important, I think, to have a place to come home to. And one place I'd love people to feel the homeness of is taking charge of your own luck. It's a delicious feeling. I mean, I can't recommend it highly enough, because the moment you say, okay, I'm going to do things that are proven to increase luck. These are not little chancy things that we pulled out of a magician's hat or something like that. These are things that a lot of people are doing to increase their luck. And like the one we talked about, having luck-worthy goals. But another one that we're touching on here is creating your lucky tribe, finding your lucky tribe, finding a group of people to hang out with who are also making positive changes in their life. So if this information appeals to you, what I want you to do is start looking around for other people that consider themselves lucky or are working on themselves in a positive way to hang out with. And I want you to beware of hanging out with people that do not consider themselves lucky, because there are a lot of folks out there. You could walk into any bar in town and talk to people sitting there, and they'd probably tell you how unlucky the world is. But you don't want to hang out there too much. You want to hang out with people. I would say, find 4 or 5 people that are smarter than you to hang out with. And I look for people like that in my own life. I know a lot of really smart people, but I'm always looking, for the next one that I can learn from too. I think Brian Tracy said that, your life basically is made up by the books you read and the people you choose to hang out with. I think there's a lot of truth to that too, because when I look back at where I kind of got my first burst of enlightenment was, picking up a little book in a bookstore in 1968 and saying, wow, there's an interesting way to look at the world.
Yeah, this is a perfect time for people to pick up books and enrich their lives. It's like a lot of people, can shut down and they can get anxious and things like that, or they can take charge, they can embrace conscious luck, and they can have this time of beautiful personal development. And I feel like in some ways, yes, this is a challenging time, but in other ways, it's about a paradigm shift in the world. And we're seeing huge shifts already in the environment. And we were just talking about relationships, but also with ourselves. You mentioned, Gay, this word delicious. And I love that because what it kind of conjures up in me and from a somatic sense is the idea that I think a lot of times people think, oh, if I'm going to go get a lottery ticket and I want to, be very prosperous or whatever, that it's kind of a self-indulgent kind of thing. But what you've really opened up here is that if you have this delicious relationship with luck, that it can expand out and it actually can be part of being more generous and having a more generous spirit overall.
As a matter of fact, I was just looking at Twitter this morning, and somebody was appreciating me for a line I had in The Big Leap. I sort of see it over my shoulder there, and that's the reason I'm looking back, but there's a copy of it back there. But in The Big Leap, I talk about a thing I call the ultimate success mantra, which for me is a sentence that I use in the backdrop of my being all the time, that I made up in 1977, so however many years ago that was. But I figured out what my life purpose that day was, and I have used it ever since. And basically, it's the idea that I expand in love, abundance, and creativity every day as I inspire others to do the same. And so built into my life purpose is a desire to inspire others with the most important things I've learned. And so for me, the most important things I've learned have awakened more of my creativity. They've enlarged my ability to experience love, and they've also expanded my net worth exponentially beyond where I ever imagined it might be. And so if you make the backdrop of your consciousness all the time the idea that you expand every day in love, that you expand every day in abundance, that you expand every day in creativity, while you're also inspiring other people to do the same. That to me has enabled me to have a delicious feeling in me pretty much every day of my life. Except once when I had the flu in 1996, I forgot about it for a few days when I was cursing the air around me. The only time I've gotten the flu in the past 30 years is my wife and I went to New Zealand way back 30 years ago. And on the plane, we made headlines because it was a plane on which something like 200 some of the 350 people on board came down with the Shanghai flu. And mine hit when we were visiting the town of Rotorua in New Zealand, which is a town of a hot spring spa that smells like sulfur, rotten eggs. And it's probably very good for you if you're only there for an hour soaking in it. But I got so sick we couldn't move for 3 days. And so I had the flu for 3 days in a place where every breath I took smell like rotten eggs. So anyway, I want to just say that was my experience with the flu. But other than that, I've been really, really healthy over the past 30 years. And so I think, and I don't have any medical evidence for this, but I think as human beings lock in on what their true purpose is, what they most love to do, and as you start doing that kind of thing, it not only makes you luckier, I think it makes you a lot healthier too. My wife is the same way. Katie, she hasn't been sick in decades. And so I think as you home in on that true self you are and the true work that you're here to do, it kind of fluffs up something in your cells that has a buoyant aspect to it. It feels good, and it turns out, I think it makes you healthier at the same time.
I totally believe that. And I think people should embrace this idea of the complex mind body system. And you can read all of Gay's books about this, but really focusing on this conscious luck right now can be such a healing activity for people. And Gay, you mentioned a mantra. I love mantras. I'm such a fan of mantras. And I know that you and Carol are including some bonuses as part of the conscious luck and their activation. So when everyone's been listening to The Luckiest Man on Earth and how you've created that for yourself, and then we've talked about generosity and how you're spreading that. One of the things that I think is so beautiful are these activations that people can listen to in the morning and in the evening to bring more of that deliciousness, that juiciness that you have and bring it into their own lives. Do you want to talk about the activations?
I appreciate you mentioning that, Catherine, because that's really, we had a wonderful time doing that. Yes, we recorded a 3-minute morning meditation, a conscious luck meditation, and a 3-minute evening conscious luck meditation. And in those 3 minutes, you get kind of an encapsulated message for the day about how to move through the day in a way that invites luck. And then the one you listen to in the evening kind of brings everything into focus and then begins to create your lucky day the next day. So they're free. You go to consciousluck.com, and I'm sure you'll provide the links for that. But consciousluck.com is the place where you can buy the book from a number of different booksellers. And then you simply type in your email and you'll get a copy of these two meditations. And I really urge you to do them because they make a huge difference and they will bring the book to life. The same materials in the book, but sometimes it's nice to have a really concentrated little 3-minute dose of it to get your mind organized and your heart organized for the day. So highly recommend those. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
And I'm thinking for those listening and that story of going through the airport, either we've been that person that went huffy puffy or we've seen it ourselves. And then there are those of us that are thinking, well, how do I get to the point where I can be like Gay and just breathe and have this conscious luck manifest? And part of it is doing that work, is doing that inner work, listening to these activations, reading the book, learning the principles, practicing them. But what a better time than now to actually take the time to do that work.
I totally agree. Also, as one thing we point out in the book, the key to any conscious change activity, whatever is doing, whether it's going to the gym every day or whatever, it begins with commitment. And we have a whole section on commitment in there that will show you the kind of commitment to make that will start bringing luck into your life. So it's a very laid out process. So I really want people to use the book as a workbook or a playbook, not really a workbook because it's play, but make it a playbook for making yourself a luckier person. Just set aside a few minutes now and then to do the actual activities.
And thank you for replacing the word work with play, because I do think that we need to have more playfulness in our life. And you're right, as you're bringing your expertise in psychology into all of that, you're aware of the obstacles of resistance and obstacles to people getting started, but you've taken care of all of that in the book.
Absolutely. It's a kind of a well laid out process, just exactly like I do it in my office here where I'm sitting.
Fantastic. So, any other tips or advice that you'd like to share with listeners? I, of course, will give you a chance to, consciousluck.com. I'll put that in the show notes. People go there. I'll put links to all of the books, not all 40, but some of the top titles that you have. But anything else that you'd like to share with listeners, either about this current time or about in general, how we can be more conscious about creating luck in our lives?
Yes, well, I showed you a little sign I keep on my desk that says breathe a while ago. And we always say you're only one breath away from changing your life. Because, for example, if you took a deep breath right now, nice big deep breath, and kind of gave your body a good stretch, and then you said, I commit to being luckier every day than I was the day before. Or I commit to being luckier today than I've ever been in my life. We have a number of statements like that in the book that you can model, but just think of an idea so that you could say to yourself that would promote you as a lucky person. Use that as a commitment place to get started. It's just like if you want to travel to Europe, first you got to say, okay, I make the commitment. I'm going to put it in my calendar. And so you get it into action. And so one thing we really recommend is just take that big deep breath and launch yourself into a whole new view of yourself as a lucky person.
I love it. Well, even with those breaths that we just took right now, you've shifted my consciousness. And ever since I interviewed Carol, I've already started to feel more lucky. So, people, you can do this. But like Gay just said, it takes commitment, maybe some breaths in between, but it's all about claiming your right to luck. And I so appreciate your work. Gay, you've been such an inspiration to me and to so many other people. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll send people to consciousluck.com. Any other places you like to send people to? Your website, the Hendricks Institute?
Sure. A couple of good places. All of our e-courses are at heartsinharmony.com. And e-courses are a great way to learn right now. And we have a lot of relationship e-courses and things for couples, things for singles, all sorts of different e-courses to go through there. And then you're also invited to go to Hendricks.com, which has the repository of all the rest of our work. And we'll show you how to go over to our nonprofit foundation where there are lots of different resources available. So Hendricks.com, heartsinharmony.com, and Conscious Luck are probably the three places to go.
And you mentioned Twitter, Instagram, any other, and Facebook, places that we can find you there. I'll also put links in the show notes, but I know you're very active and people are obviously inspired by your posts and your reminders there.
Thank you. Yes, we have a lot of fun with things, putting out information. I've been lately doing my own Instagram, and I've really been having fun with it.
Well, we all have a little bit more time to get some visual inspiration from Instagram. So I'll put links to that as well. And thank you so much for all of the inspiration and for all of the work that you do in the world, your humanitarian work as well. And I look forward to all of our listeners and viewers getting some more conscious luck in their lives.
Thank you.